Welcome to our channel Scary Sagas, where we bring you the most amazing true horror stories. This story will recount the most horrifying, bone-chilling experience I've ever had, involving the paranormal. It all began in a desolate church, where the events unfolded in a terrifying manner. Allow me to set the scene. The church property consisted of two buildings, situated side by side when viewed from the front. The first building stood to the left, easily catching the eye of any visitor. The second, slightly obscured, lay behind the first structure, veering a bit to the right. It was in this enigmatic and foreboding setting that the nightmare began. On that fateful day, we had an event in the back of the property. As expected, my father, being the head of the group, made sure we were the last ones remaining. As Dad tidied up, I decided to make my way to the imposing gymnasium. Engrossed in a game of basketball, the echoes of my excitement were abruptly shattered by a piercing scream from upstairs. Now, if you're familiar with horror movies, you'll understand the grave mistake I made. Instead of fleeing from the building, as any sane person would, I found myself sprinting upstairs to investigate the source of the scream. But as I reached the upper level, I was met with emptiness. I combed through every corner, desperate to find the girl in distress, only to realize she was nowhere to be found. I knew I couldn't be imagining things, and the lingering uncertainty prompted me to set up a stakeout at the bottom of the stairs, determined to uncover the truth behind this eerie occurrence. Perched in the chair, time seemed to crawl by for what felt like an eternity. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a tattered dress fluttering through the doorway. An unsettling hum, sending chills down my spine, filled the air. Despite typically being impervious to fear, the sight and sound were enough to crack my bravado. Nevertheless, my curiosity drove me to ascend the stairs. As I neared the wall dividers, their presence heightened the sense of foreboding. And that's when I heard a demonic chant, chilling to the core. Peering through the opening, all I could see was an inky void. But as I turned my gaze toward the corner, there it stood. A black mass, a creature so malevolent, it could only be described as a demon. Its grotesque skin, torn apart and resembling charred flesh, seemed afflicted with the agony of third-degree burns. But the most petrifying feature was its size, burning crimson orbs that whispered of death and imprisonment within the fiery depths of hell. As I stumbled backward, compelled to escape like the protagonist in any horror movie, I inadvertently stepped on a pin, shattering it beneath my feet with a cacophony resembling 1,000 glass shards. When I glanced up, the demon loomed right before the exit. Without a second thought, I turned and sprinted toward the stairs. My heart pounded as I felt the searing breath of damnation upon my back, catching a whiff of the stench of death. The resounding scrape of footsteps, like jagged rocks upon a chalkboard, echoed behind me. At last, I slammed the door shut, abruptly silencing the malevolence that pursued me. One might wish that the story concluded at this point, but such wishes would be futile. As night descended and I sought refuge within the safety of my home, an insidious feeling washed over me. Though alone in my room, I couldn't shake the unsettling sensation that something was watching my every move. My attempts to sleep proved futile, and it wasn't until around 2 a.m. that exhaustion finally overcame me. Yet, my respite was short-lived, as an eerie hum, resonating with that same chant, pierced the silence at precisely 3 a.m. Panic gripped my soul as I turned to face it, and there it stood, an indescribable terror. Fear paralyzed me, rendering me immobile. while the creature emitted a low growl. "You can't run from me." With lightning speed, it charged at me, and all I could do was utter desperate prayers. I felt the sting of its claws grazing my flesh once, then twice, before an ear-piercing screech filled the room, and suddenly, everything returned to normal. The oppressive weight of being watched dissipated, and I succumbed to uncontrollable sobs. My parents rushed into my room, comforting me until I finally fell back into a restless sleep. When morning arrived, I summoned the courage to recount the horrors that had befallen me to my parents. Their response was dismissive, claiming it was nothing more than a dream. Fearing their disbelief, I played along, concealing the true extent of my ordeal. However, upon using the bathroom, I lifted my shirt and discovered 2 sets of deep, swollen scratches etched upon my back, evidence of the demonic encounter. Since that harrowing day, my faith has grown immeasurably. I've come to realize that there exist malevolent entities capable of inflicting physical harm upon us, while we are powerless to retaliate. Yet, I've also learned that we possess the means to defend ourselves and banish them to where they rightfully belong. So, to the evil spirit that haunts the church gym, let us never cross paths again, for I now stand fortified by my unwavering faith. Prepare yourself for a series of chilling encounters that took place during my time as a lifeguard at a hot spring in the heart of Colorado. While I adored my job, with its easygoing atmosphere and fantastic colleagues, it was the night shifts that held the most otherworldly experiences. Allow me to share some of these spine-tingling tales. During my first summer as a lifeguard, my supervisor, whom we'll call Jake, assigned me to the gymnasium located above the lobby and locker rooms. On that particular night, we had closed up a bit later than usual, and as I ascended to the gym, darkness enveloped the space. I switched on the lights and decided to crank up the stereo, hoping some music would help me finish my tasks more swiftly and perhaps add a touch of dance to the proceedings. I set about cleaning the gym, vacuuming the floors, wiping down the mirrors, and organizing the equipment onto the weight racks. When it came time to mop, I opened the creaky attic door, flipped on the light, and retrieved the bucket and mop. After filling the bucket in the bathroom, I closed the attic door and commenced mopping. It was then that I noticed something peculiar. The attic door stood wide open. Perplexed, I shrugged it off, assuming I must have forgotten to close it properly. I shut it again and proceeded with my task. As I mopped, the stereo began to falter, emitting intermittent bursts of static. Intrigued, I dropped the mop momentarily to fiddle with the knobs, managing to restore the music. Assuming the issue would resolve itself, I resumed mopping. However, just minutes later, the radio cut out entirely, and one of the lights flickered off. Concerned that the motion sensor was acting up, I made my way toward the switch. But then, something halted me in my tracks. An ominous shadow, resembling a person, materialized on the wall to my left. I turned to observe it, attempting to move my hand, hoping it was a trick of the light. But the shadow remained motionless, a separate entity. Fear coursed through me as tears welled in my eyes, paralyzed by the inexplicable presence. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, the shadow streaked along the wall, vanishing into the darkness near the exit. Overwhelmed with terror, I dropped the mop and sprinted downstairs, screaming for Jake. "Jake! Jake! I saw a shadow. Someone is up there!" I cried out, my voice trembling. He regarded my terrified figure and burst into laughter. "Ah, so you've met our resident ghost," he chuckled. Motioning for me to take a seat, he continued, "Legend has it that he was a cop who tragically ended his own life in the attic. Don't worry, he means no harm, as long as you don't disturb or disrespect him. And remember, never open the equipment closet at night." I nodded, mustering the courage to return upstairs, with Jake by my side, to complete our duties. After that encounter, I didn't see the ghost for some time. It wasn't until my third summer at the hot spring that I had another eerie experience. One of my co-workers mentioned witnessing the punching bag swing vigorously, despite there being no open windows and everyone had already left. Reminded of my previous encounter, I shared my story, which garnered a nod of understanding. One night, while closing the gym, I switched on the stereo and began cleaning. Retrieving the mop from the attic, I filled the bucket and positioned it in the center of the room. It was then that I noticed some equipment left out, beckoning to be returned to its proper place. As I reached for the door to the equipment closet, a sudden hesitation gripped me, recalling the warning about opening it at night. Yet, knowing the task had to be completed, I steeled myself and swung the door open. Inside, something inexplicable caught my eye: a small opening at the top of the closet, leading to the attic. And there, for a fleeting moment, I swear I saw someone peering down at me through the aperture. Startled, the figure retreated into the darkness of the attic, vanishing from sight. Slamming the door shut, I raced downstairs in a panic, seeking refuge in the guardroom. Several co-workers followed, and we inspected the closet. One brave soul climbed the shelves and shone a flashlight into the attic, but there was no trace of anyone. To this day, lifeguards still report sightings of the ghostly presence. Countless stories circulate about him, serving as a reminder to never threaten his realm. Nowadays, when I clean the gym, I always greet him before I begin mopping, engaging in conversation as if acknowledging his existence. This approach seems to have garnered his favor, for I haven't encountered him since. However, as Christmas approaches, I wonder if he will make his presence known once more. If he does, rest assured, I will keep you all informed. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Jax, and today I have a bone-chilling ghost story to share with you, one that circulated through my high school for years. Now, I wasn't a direct witness to this tale, but the person who experienced it firsthand told it to me and my classmates personally. Whether you choose to believe it or not, I assure you that this account still sends shivers down my spine to this day. Our story takes place in a small town in Michigan, at a middle/high school where I was in either 6th or 7th grade when I first heard it. The central figure in this tale is a man named Mr. Gary, who worked as both a janitor and a substitute teacher at the school. Mr. Gary was adored by everyone, an older gentleman with a kind heart and a sweet demeanor. For privacy purposes, we'll refer to him as Mr. Gary. One fateful day, Mr. Gary was substituting for our social studies class, and it happened to be a free day with no assignments. We seized the opportunity to persuade Mr. Gary into sharing one of his ghostly encounters. You see, he had mentioned on previous occasions that he had encountered ghosts. After much coaxing, he finally relented and began recounting his most terrifying experience, yet a tale he confessed he couldn't explain, even to this day. It was a dark night, well past midnight, when Mr. Gary found himself going about his janitorial duties throughout the school building. With the school closed and all the doors leading outside locked, Mr. Gary believed he was the sole occupant that night. He was nearing the end of his tasks when he approached the middle school gym and began hearing something utterly bizarre: shouting, cheering, the unmistakable sounds of a basketball game. It seemed as if the game was in full swing. Perplexed, Mr. Barry assumed he had forgotten there was a game scheduled for that evening and that he had miscalculated the time. Curiosity piqued. He made his way to the gym doors and swung them open. In an instant, silence descended upon the space. The gym lay empty, bathed in dim lighting from only a couple of scattered bulbs. There was no one there. Now, Mr. Barry admitted that he was a skeptical and logical person, often approaching ghostly encounters with a critical eye. So, he brushed off the strange occurrence as a figment of his imagination or some auditory illusion. Convinced he was mistaken, Mr. Gary proceeded into the gym, resolute in completing his cleaning duties. As he set about tidying the gym, he picked up discarded trash, like soda cans, and disposed of them in one of the large, circular trash bins found throughout the school. Once the actual gym area was pristine, Mr. Barry moved on to clean the girls' locker room, situated adjacent to the gym. After finishing his task in the locker room, he returned to the gym, only to witness something utterly terrifying. Now, let me paint the scene for you. Center of the basketball court boasts a circular line with the school's mascot, a Spartan head, at its goal. To Mr. Barry's horror, the circle's line was now adorned with neatly arranged soda cans, positioned flawlessly along its trajectory. There was no logical explanation. No one was present. No one could have entered the building. Mr. Barry was alone, and yet the soda cans he had discarded earlier had somehow leaped out of the trash and aligned themselves with uncanny precision along the circle's perimeter. It was an impossible and inexplicable occurrence, an act that transcended the natural realm. At that moment, Mr. Barry couldn't shake the feeling that the phantom basketball game he had heard earlier and the mysteriously arranged soda cans were connected. Something was amiss. Without hesitation, he swiftly completed his janitorial duties and promptly departed for home. Days later, he reached out to a friend, recounting the unnerving incident. However, his friend merely laughed, believing he was joking or attempting to frighten her. Perplexed by her disbelief, Mr. Barry pressed further, only to learn that another individual from the area had shared a similar experience publicly. In fact, the encounter had even found its way into a section of a Michigan ghost story book. The revelation left Mr. Gary stunned. He had no inkling that his encounter was part of a broader narrative, and this realization left him deeply unsettled. Unfortunately, his friend remained unconvinced. As I mentioned earlier, Mr. Barry possessed a skeptical disposition towards supernatural phenomena. Even while recounting his story, he attempted to disprove his own experience, rationalizing and casting doubt upon it. Ghosts and the supernatural were not part of his belief system, and that's precisely what makes his account all the more chilling and credible. There was no incentive for him to fabricate this tale, no personal gain or ulterior motive. Moreover, he harbored no interest in the supernatural. He simply did not believe in it. This story continues to terrify me, even now, 7.5 years later. It makes me wonder about the countless encounters other school janitors might have once students and staff vacate the premises, leaving them alone in a dark and eerie building. They seem to like that these stories will leave you with more questions than answers. They are a reminder that sometimes the truth is much darker and more mysterious than we ever imagined. Join us next time on Scary Sagas for other spine-chilling true stories.